It's only halfway through. It is my pleasure to take a call on this, the committee stage and part 4 of the Health and Safety Reform Bill, and I've been trying to find a clause in the bill that I could actually speak to that no one else has addressed. And I actually have a serious question for the Minister and the Chair, and it relates to section 169, sentencing criteria, E, and I read, the degree of departure from prevailing standards in the person's sector or industry as an aggravating factor. And the reason that I've brought that up is I've been trying to find out what these prevailing standards are. So if the Minister could provide me with a definition of what prevailing standard is, I would really appreciate it. And the reason I would really appreciate it is that I want to acknowledge that WorkSafe have put out a publication in April this year, and it's titled Health and Safety, Attitudes and Behaviours in the New Zealand Workforce, a study of workers and employers. And it's a qualitative analysis, and it really focused on the agricultural sector. So it's an agricultural report. And the reason I really want to ask about what is the definition of prevailing standard, and it's because of some of the findings in this report. What we know, Mr. Chair, is that every year almost 100 people die in workplaces across New Zealand, and 94% of the people who die are men, and they die in high-risk industries like forestry, construction, manufacturing, fishing, and the agricultural sector. And the interesting analysis for me is when I look at the characteristics of these industries, they say that they're driven by pride, that they're driven by masculinity, and it's a hierarchical context. People are under pressure, and that it's becoming increasingly diverse, Mr. Chair. But the other thing specifically in the agricultural space is that these people are independent and isolated. And so we're talking about a group of people who in some regards have, and I'll quote again from this report, which says that health and safety is considered important, but something that can get in the way of day-to-day farming. Unpredictability of agricultural work may foster a fatalistic attitude. So the people who work in the agricultural sector, Mr. Chair, actually have an attitude that things just happen, that, it can't be changed. And I think that it actually, the whole intention and focus on this legislation is to change things, is to make sure that 100 people a year, mostly men, aren't dying in the workplace. And so when we're faced with these attitudes of the people who work in these industries themselves, I guess I am now highlighting what's the prevailing standard or attitude within a sector that actually has this fatalistic idea of the workspace. And actually the whole reason we want somebody empowered to be a health and safety representative, Mr. Chair, is that so we can change these attitudes. Because how are we going to change the attitudes of a sector where we know many of them are dying? And so that's what I want to know, because if this piece of legislation isn't going to be part of changing those attitudes that are actually killing people, and they're killing husbands, they're killing fathers, they're killing grandfathers, they're killing brothers, and no one's really talked about the gender implications of this piece of legislation. This legislation is about our men, which is why we saw the women come here crying, holding their husbands' photos, because families have been wrecked. And I just don't understand what's happening, given where this legislation came from. And so that's my question to the Minister and the Chair. So what's going to happen then if the prevailing standard or attitude in these sectors means that it's okay for people to die? How's WorkSafe actually going to change that outcome? Are we going to tolerate it and say, hey, it's okay? We're okay with 100 people dying every year, because, as the people we work in the sector think, they've got this fatalistic attitude that some of them are just going to die. Is that acceptable? What this legislation actually does, Mr Chair, is say yes, it is. It is acceptable. We as a country accept that 100 people are going to die every year.
I call Joanne Hayes.
I move that